So, do you want to say any more, Traian, or are we just?
No, we'll touch on the topic and some of the curiosities that we both have on the topic and why we chose this topic in a CCTA framework. And before we move into that, we wanted to open the floor for all of you to say hi and share something that you'd like about your curiosity. You know, what's something that triggered your own curiosity on the theme. Anything that can be related to CCTA, or it can be broader, doesn't matter.
So why are you here, really?
Yeah.
What is it about belonging and this that you managed to get yourself the time to join us? So what's your curiosity? What are you hoping to get from it? Anybody?
Okay,
Yeah, go on, Jenny.
We can fight to go. You can go first.
No, you go, Jenny.
Okay, so my curiosity is piqued by a number of things. Partly McNeil and the injunctive messages and the I don't belong. And I'm adopted, and I'm still working through at a much deeper level than previously what that actually has meant for me and means for me going forward. And that's why I'm interested in looking at belonging in a CCTA, through a CCTA lens.
Right.
I live in Suffolk and it's pretty rainy here today, but it's lovely to see everyone.
Thank you, Jenny. Welcome.
So I'll go next, and it's my first co-creative training. There's just something about this title that pulled me in. Maybe it's about never feeling like I belong, because I'm the different one in my family. I always have been. I was not born in this country, and that caused some prejudice amongst other members of my family. It's like I was the special child that was somewhere out there in the world and then was suddenly launched on them. And yeah, I don't even feel like I belong to TA. I never really have. The thing about my belonging is that I'm quite happy to join things. I'm always on the periphery. I get people try to pull me into the center, and I don't want to be in the center. I just want to be left on that outside circle. Yeah. So I don't know why I'm here. It just called to me.
I am happy to talk next. I'm just finishing my foundation year of TA, and again, the title just popped right out at me because it's something that's really come up with the injunctions and something I've been working on in therapy. I was born and brought up abroad, and I spent my entire childhood moving around the globe, and came back to this country at 14, and I've never felt like I belonged. So I've always felt, I kind of only late in life realized that my cultural identity is German, not British. But I also grew up in the Middle East. And what's also been interesting is through my counsellor, my work with my therapist, I've realized I have created my unique sense of belonging. And so that's I'm quite interested to explore this concept. Yeah, it's quite a loaded one for me as well. And unlike Linda, I always want to be at the middle, but always feel at the periphery. So I have the opposite thing. Yeah.
Wow. Interesting, really interesting introductions. Yeah.
Thank you, Elaine, and thank you, Linda, for what you shared earlier.
Hi, everyone. I'm Becky, obviously. I've done, well, I'm in my 6th year of training with TA. And yeah, similarly to Jenny, I'm adopted. And I think only just realising now that I'm 50, how much that has affected me. Had a lot of therapy about a lot of other things, but not really adoption. And after being in a church community for a long time, until last year, yeah, I'm just really interested in the topic of belonging. And I've realised, yeah, it's really important to me to belong to something, which I don't feel at the minute. I always worked very hard to help enable others to belong, I think particularly to the church or the community. And now we've moved out of the church, we've moved to village, and I don't belong to very much. But I think obviously it's a lot more related to me and my stuff. So yeah, I saw this group and I thought that sounds really interesting. It's my first experience of co-creative as well, so I'm not really sure what to expect. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more? Everybody doesn't have to do it, but we'll leave you the opportunity if you want to.
Okay, I'll continue on. Yeah, I'm just actually aware of how nervous I'm feeling in this particular session, which is interesting because I joined the positive games and I wasn't, but I am feeling nervous, which I think is something of the reflection of the pull of the belonging or not belonging, and that's going on. And I'm really resonating with what others have said in different ways. So I haven't got a particular backstory, just that I feel that sense of belonging or not belonging very strongly. And it's a very guttural feeling for me, both for myself and for others. And certainly, so I'm in sort of probably year 6 of private practice now. And I've done a mixture of all sorts of works, including a lot of group work and individual work. And that question, or that sense of belonging that exists or doesn't exist, it seems to be so topical and existential, you know. And so, yeah, that's it really. I'm just really curious, but nervous as well. So can't say more than that. Thank you.
I'm Amy. The question's thrown me actually, because I didn't think about the title, because I come to as many of the CCTA sessions as I can. So as you've all been speaking, I thought, gosh, actually, it somehow does feel a different session. And I have pinged between feeling part of these sessions, of these workshops, because I'm seeing familiar faces of people who've been coming along. And I guess my curiosity is around conscious, unconscious part of belonging. I'm very aware of my conscious and what goes on for me there, which is reflected in what a lot of you have said, but that unconscious, what goes on there. So that's my curiosity.
Thank you for sharing, Amy.
I'm Sandra. I'm in Manchester, and actually, what Amy says really resonates, because I've been coming to as many of these as I can. I saw this one last week and couldn't make it. So when I saw it had been rescheduled, I was really excited. And I missed one I was booked on last week. I got the wrong day. So I was really pleased to be able to come. And as everybody's been talking, I was thinking about belonging, and I've not actually looked at it like this, but I think looking at my belonging is something I'm working on in my own personal therapy. And I hadn't actually looked at it like that. So I'm perhaps having a dawning moment or something. But I'm really pleased to be here. It's nice to see everybody who's familiar and nice to see some new faces too.
Thanks, Sandra. I notice you've got your voice today as well.
Yes, and I apologise. I'm eating lunch. I've managed to squeeze this between clients, so I am eating but I am listening.
I'm just going to say belonging has been coming up. The word has been coming up quite frequently with me. And I thought it was really important for me to be here today because I'm trying to write an essay at the moment about how I feel about my work and the fact that I don't feel I belong in any work situation that I go into. It's really deep, and I think that's got a lot to do with my family. So yeah, it is really important for me to be here. But in terms of TA, I have never felt so, what can I say, involved, connected and wanted. So I know that there is a family out there for me, and it's definitely TA. It's the only thing in my life that I feel so connected with. I'm like, that is me. So you can see my face changing now. I love it. But I don't like the fact that I'm in these situations at work where I think, what the hell is going on? Pattern, what's going on again? How can I deal with this? What do I need to do? Not what should they do? What do I need to do? How do I feel safe? How can I make myself, in our last session, transform into this job? So a bit of a, yeah, it's really big with me. And I want to go away feeling like I belong. But that's a bit much to ask for. But it is definitely something I'm working on. And it's really nice to see some familiar faces on here as well. And again, the new faces. You do a great job, guys, with this co-creation sort of workshops. And I love it. And I can't stand it if I miss one either. So really, thank you before I even begin.
Thank you, and good questions to ask.
It seemed a bit obscure if I didn't kind of talk or say anything, bearing in mind the subject matter. I think once I've attended a co-creative workshop, so it was the Don't Belong that pulled me to this one. I'm like Becky, 6 years into my training, getting ready for my CTA, which won't be next year, year after. So for me, this is a combination of work and personal, as I definitely don't have a don't belong. And forgive me later, because I will have to put my camera off while I kind of move my laptop around the house, so I don't be feeling seasick as I carry you with me.
Okay. Anybody else?
I'd like to check in if I'm not like a Dalek anymore, if that's okay.
You're a bit like a Dalek and a bit more like a Scouse Garlic at the minute.
I'm going to try this way then without my camera, and I'll be a Scouse. Yeah. I'll just be Scouse instead of a Scouse Dalek. Yeah, I'd just like to introduce myself. My name is Sarah, and I'm pretty much complete my second year TA. Yeah, there's several reasons. So this is so my sort of holy, unholy trinity is belonging, being, and importance. They're what I'm drilling down to in my own personal therapy. And I'm realizing that it's not just personal, it is more than that, it is existential for me. And it's touching all levels of my consciousness. And for me, my sense of belonging is coming from the non-human aspect of my life, the real deep stuff, the stuff I can't articulate or give words to. And also I would like to share that I identify as an addict. And in the rooms, this is this is what we talk about, the feeling of disconnection, and a lot of the reasons why we turn to a substance. So yeah, it's I'm curious on many levels, because this is where I'm at now. This is about, there's nowhere else or no one else I can go to get a sense of belonging. I can't just keep searching. Yeah, so I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Sarah? And I've noticed that Tanya's joined us as well. Hi, Tanya.
Hi.
Nice to see you.
Hello, I'm glad to see you too. I'm glad to be here as a participant because usually I'm in the role of a translator for Ukrainian and Russian audience. So thank you very much for accepting me.
You're welcome. It's nice to see you.
Nice to see you. Nice to see you too. And for the rest, what Tatiana is talking about, it's a group that Paul and I and a few others belong to, who are offering support for some our Ukrainian friends. And Tatiana does the brilliant job of translating. Welcome.
Thank you.
So are you feeling nervous, Traian? Because I'm a bit nervous. Yeah, I am, and it's a bit of a positive nervousness, honestly, because I loved what everybody brought in, and I'm nervous because I'm really curious where we're gonna be at the end of this session. I have no idea, but I did resonate a lot with a lot of the topics that were brought in. What's your nervousness about? Well, my nervousness is that I suspect that people are expecting us to have the answers and we don't. Oh, no, we don't. I mean, good that you're mentioning it, because I hope that we're not giving the impression that we have answers or the answers. We might have answers. Yeah. Because Tudor and Summers haven't written anything about belonging. So it's a topic that we are exploring at the minute, just to get some sense of how does belonging fit into a co-creative TA framework. Well, it's interesting because Paul and I were looking at this topic, I think, for about 1.5 years when we initially wanted to roll it out in a workshop, I think in the residentials, Paul. And I was surprised when you actually mentioned that belonging is not only is not that much discussed from a co-creative perspective, but seems like it's not a wide topic discussed in general as a theme, which I found surprising because it's such a core theme. I almost see part of co-creativity being about belonging itself. So it's a prerequisite to facilitate belonging. So I was even more surprised when you were mentioning it's not that emphasized in the writings of Graham and Tudor and Keith. So we tend to have an introduction, and then we tend to have a discussion around the topic, and you're all invited in to have the discussion with us and join in. And I think it is, if we're linking belonging into co-creative TA, how can you be we if we don't belong? Yeah. And I suppose I'm conscious that a number of people said that they've not done any co-creative TA in the past. So is it worth us just reminding everybody what the basics are? Yeah, I heard that too, and I think it would be useful. Jenny?
Just an administrative point. Can I check that we're having a tea break halfway through, please? Roughly halfway through. Okay. I might be able to eat my lunch then, if we could do that.
Okay. Yeah, we would normally do that.
We can have that, sure.
Great, thank you.
Thanks for asking, Jenny. Yeah, so I think it would be useful, Paul, if we briefly mention the 4 principles of co-creative TA. Yeah. And you did mention winners. Do you want to touch on that first?
Yeah. I think weeness is the first one that Children Summers talked about, which is when ourselves and another or others are in this relational space of weeness. So we are not alone. We are together. We are ideally, if we are we're supporting one another and we're not defensive. And it's like 1 and 1 equals 2.5, so that we get more out of putting things in together, so we can access more resources than if we were just two separate people working on our own.
Yeah, and you mentioning 2.5, which includes also the context. So it's even beyond our two personas or identities. It's even broader than that. This idea of weeness. So this is one of the 4 principles. Another one is present-centeredness, which is another co-creative tenet. And this is about, I see it both as a noun and also as a verb or as a process, because it describes also a state of being, which is to be present-centered and aware with whatever comes from our past, and use that as a resource and not as something that dictates our present. And I also see it as a verb, because I see it as a dynamic process that almost never settles. It's an ongoing aspiration or scope of moving towards a state of presence. And I really like this idea of not ignoring the past, not discounting the past, perhaps accounting it differently and using its resources, because there are always resources in our past. Paul?
Yeah, I see it very similarly in that, to me, present-centeredness, there are 2 major aspects to it. One is being present within ourselves and being aware of our own processes. So being aware of our past, being aware of what we've brought with us into wherever it is that we are, and maybe what's getting in the way of us being present. So what are the transferences going on? You know, what are the counter transferences that are coming up? What is it from my past that I'm projecting onto other people? So it's being in contact intrapsychically with our past and being aware of it as much as we can. And the second bit is about what's going on in the relationship, with whoever we are with, and what's going on in the environment. So it's an internal and an external process.
Good. And the third one, Paul?
The third one is shared responsibility. Yeah. So Children Summers talk about the responsibility being shared but not equal. So at various times, we will take more responsibility or less responsibility than the other person or the other people for what we are doing together. So it's about, if we are in weeness, then we are content, happy, willing to bring our resources into the equation. Yeah. And we're also happy and willing to ask for help. And not to take the parental bit and occupy, if we want, the needy bit and allow the needy bit to come out, so that at different times we can be needy, or we can be supportive or nurturing or present-centered or problem-solving, or just asking for help.
Yeah, I see it the same, very much the same. And especially in especially so, or perhaps even more so in organizations, because I'm a TAO, so practitioner and supervisor and trainer in the organizational field. This idea of shared but not equal responsibility is so important. I think it really fosters and creates cultures of belonging, or as close as to a belonging culture as we thrive and aim for. And the fourth principle, Paul, which actually you were the one who brought it in co-creative TA, because initially Keith and Graham talked about 3, and the fourth is mutual positive regard, and you named that, which is about, I think it touches on the idea of okayness from a more traditional TA perspective, classical TA perspective. But for me, it's also it's also the reminder bit, the process bit, the dynamic bit of constantly being aware of my own needs, my own state, the state of the others, and the context around me, and what are the resources, what are the positive bits when the tough gets going, because it does eventually, and sometimes. Where do we and how do I find the resources to aspire for that mutual positive regard? So it's both a behavioral level for me and very much also an existential level when I think about this principle of co-creative TA. And Paul, please add, because you're the one who brought it in.
Well, for me, it's more than okayness. It's about being positive, about supporting the other person's resources and who they are. It's about not judging people, and it's also about acknowledging our own good bits, and our own needs, and not putting ourselves last. Not putting ourselves doing things at the expense of others sometimes, and accounting for our needs and wants as well. Not discounting ourselves.
Yeah. Yes, and these are the 4 principles of co-creative TA, which next to quite a few models, let's say, make up the ground of the theory, let's say. And the principles, because we do bring them up every now and then in these sessions, are here also to guide us through every co-creative experience we want to facilitate, both for ourselves and also for the ones around us. So they are very much living principles.
So I think if you put them all together, it invites us to be non-defensive in our relationships with others, basically, and to be aware of that unconscious defensiveness that comes from when we were small, when we experienced traumas, and from, in terms of trauma, what I'm referring to is when we didn't get our needs met. Because for all of us at the time, and for very small children, babies, being powerless when you want something and you don't get it is traumatic. And of course, we don't remember because we didn't have a memory. We don't have memories of it. We may have bodily memories, but what we developed were patterns to deal with the fact that we didn't get our needs met at the time. And we've reinforced, we developed patterns to enable us to cope with that trauma, that traumatic event, when we were uncomfortable, when we wanted something, when we didn't get recognized, Byrne talked about the different hungers for contact and recognition and all the others. And though when we didn't get those hungers met, it was traumatic for us.
So Paul, since you're bringing up hungers, there is a connection to belonging, which I see, you know, especially around recognition that Byrne is very much talking about. And, you know, at an existential level, recognition does touch, or belonging foster, let's say, I think the need for recognition. And in an environment where the feeling of belonging is reduced, recognition cannot be too highly met. So that's how I'm connecting the two. How about if we move a bit on to our own curiosities about the topic of belonging, and, you know, how do we resonate with it from a co-creative perspective? And then we could open it up. It's already open to the wider group, but let's see how that progresses. So what got you into this topic, and where do you see, where are you with it now?
You talking to me?
Yeah, I'm talking to you. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think for me, like you were, lots of you were talking about, is one thing I have come to recognize over the years is my level of belonging or not belonging. And when Traian said a couple of years ago, Traian and I started looking at the topic of belonging. And, you know, we were wondering at what level is it that we are able to belong? Because when we are born, we become detached. We're no longer enclosed and attached to our mother. So of itself, it's a traumatic event. So we become a separate person, a separate entity. And I think there is an expectation or a desire to stay attached. Yeah. And there's a lot of TA theory and other psychotherapy and theories around attachment and detachment. So we suddenly become detached, and we have a coping mechanism for addressing that trauma. And I think with what Byrne was talking about, hungers for contact and recognition are all part of a need to stay attached or to regulate the detachment process.
And it's a bit of a mutual enforcing process, because, you know, on one hand, part of the attachment is what feeds us and, you know, gets our needs met, and part of the desire to get our needs met is what keeps on the attachment. So a lot of the defensive processes that you were mentioning, Paul, are many times just ways that worked in the past. And co-creativity for me is a process where a mirror is put in front of me through the group process, through the facilitation, through my own inquiry. And the question is, you know, where does this belong to? Without a judgmental approach to it, without a heaviness attached to it. You know, is this something that belonged to the past, rightfully so? And does it belong today, or what shape should it be in my present life? And that's the idea of that present-centeredness, to welcome the past in a non-judgmental manner. So yeah, it's that's why I was surprised that belonging is not such a big theme So it should almost be a core concept, I think, in the theory of human development. And it might be, but perhaps between the lines.
I suppose the curiosity is what is it about belonging that we're frightened of?
Mm-hmm.
At an unconscious defensive level. Why do many people have difficulties in belonging? Yeah, what is it that we are having to give up, or what's that unconscious fear that might happen if we belong? And I suspect it's the fear of belonging and then being detached, or being rejected. So if we don't belong, we can't be rejected. Yeah. So I suspect that that's something that gets in the way of us belonging. The fear of not being able to meet those hungers for recognition and contact and structure.
Yeah, I see the same. And I was hearing you all, or almost all of you, I think, talk about curiosities of the workshop. And, you know, if you play with the word to belong, it's also a longing to be. So, you know, this is not something that should be discounted in any way, because it's so core. And there's this question that I heard a few years back, which is a good question to reflect on, I think, which is, what do I need to leave? What do I need to let go in order to belong? So what is it that might not have room in the community, family, one-on-one relationship, or even relationship to myself, that doesn't find its way? And coming back again to this idea of present-centeredness and co-creativity, what I found very useful in this frame of reference, I found it much more welcoming for those pieces to join along, to come along, and to be looked at. So for me, that's where my curiosity on the topic was. And I think they were perhaps welcomed also in other ways of looking through TA lens in general. I just found co-creativity through its principles to be more welcoming. That was that was the impact that it had on me. And being in groups facilitated in a more co-creative manner opened up that for me.
I think it's interesting you turned it round in terms of longing to be. Yeah, so the belonging, turn it, and I think there's a little bit missing there. It's longing to be me. Yeah, and be allowed to be me, and being acceptable for being me. Because I think very often we have our attachment to others and our ability to get strokes for being up for recognition and meeting the hungers. But certainly when we're small, we're not allowed to be me. We adapt so that we can get some recognition, we can get some strokes, that we can have the structure and the contact. So belonging is sort of we want it, but we have to adapt and not be ourselves in order to be acceptable and to belong. So that longing to be me is maybe what gets in the way of us being able to belong, because we find that we're only acceptable if we're not us.
Can I come in and say something there, guys?
You don't need to ask to come in.
Okay.
Come along.
I'm a very polite, over-adapted young lady. I've been around the TA and psychotherapy world now for about 25, 26 years. In fact, I'm sort of like coming to the end of my career. One of the things that has become apparent to me over all those years is what you were saying, Paul, about being accepted, being acceptable. Because my experience is that if the young baby is not experienced as acceptable by their primary caregiver for whatever reason, you know, it might be a baby who can't feed. It might be a baby who has such colic that it's crying all the time. And it's the perception of the mother somehow that this baby doesn't like them, doesn't want them, or their tolerance level, their window of tolerance can't cope with this child. And that they reject, or they seemingly reject the child. My experience is that when that not acceptability happens at that really young age, I'm going to say this, and it might be well controversial. That's no word there. I don't think that can be mended. I don't think it can be, and I'd really be interested to hear what you guys think about that in terms of the co-creative model. And I also think that one of the things that is really quite dangerous, for example, in the cathexis school, by taking a wounded adult in and reparenting, if for whatever reason something goes wrong in that therapeutic relationship, that's a double whammy for the client. It's like that wound then is even deeper. And as therapists, I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that we can make. We can take on something that we're not prepared to finish. And I'm not talking about curved balls come in, of course. But there's something there about, if you're going to be prepared to go in at that level and commit yourself to that extent, it's got to be for life. So I don't know where I'm going with that. It's just that sort of sense of that early experience of the child of not being acceptable that does such deep damage.
I agree, Linda. I'm also, I will share something what resonates with what you're saying, and I'm curious what others, how others resonate with it. I tend to agree that there's something there that cannot be fully healed, met, and acknowledging that is part of the healing process in the present moment. I don't see any human development from the lenses of, instead of a better word, final cure.
No, I don't either.
No matter, I don't work in psychotherapy, so there is a limit to the depth that I work in. But if I look at organizations or community life in general, I come more from the perspective of what is it that we learn? What is it that we need to learn for ourselves and for others in order to belong at a deeper level to the communities, organizations, teams, groups, communities that we're part of, without discounting at all that hurt side. You know, you were talking about reparenting and the reparenting school. My experience with co-creativity is that it's welcoming that part of the past in a highly non-judgmental manner, from a mutual positive regard. And this idea of shared, even not equal responsibility, plays a role in this. Because, and I'll finish on this idea. When I think about the reparenting, there is a nuance. I wanted to say slight, but I don't think it's slight. It's a nuance of that shared responsibility being still quite unbalanced. And I'm not talking about the more pathological cases. Again, I wouldn't go into that from my own practice, but I think the ability to share the responsibility is great for many of us, if we just allowed to do that, even with what comes from our past, and using that hurt as a resource without denying it, without letting it feel, because it does feel bad at times.
And I think it's a huge mistake for us as therapists to believe that we can help the client to experience that primal acceptance that I just want to go that smell, that touch, that although I am separate from you, I am still one. Was it Margaret Mailer who had the I am you and you are me stage, and then the separation stage. So some babies are separated so much faster. They're rejected.
Yeah, as Paul was mentioning.
Yeah,
I do deeply believe that through ideas of co-creative TA and others, there can be moments and there can be thriving towards similar, if not very similar, experiences that we might have missed in the past. I genuinely believe that, and it's in the quality of the relationship and in the quality of the context that's facilitated that can be deeply meaningful. It's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying it's quick, but I do believe in that. I genuinely believe in that power of connection. And for me, belonging and CCTA are very much linked from that perspective. Well, thanks for your comments and ideas. I wanted to open it up even further for others to share what you're thinking.
I'd like to share the impact of what Linda said on me about the you don't think it can be mended, that and it really resonated with me, and I'm just settling with it at the moment, and part of my journey, and continues to be part of my journey, is accepting that shit happened, accepting that this happened, and not letting it take me over. And what TA is it's taking time, my TA journey. And I do belong in TA. I don't think I've ever belonged anywhere else, really. And it's still an enormous challenge not to fall into that chasm of it'll never be mended. And it still feels raw now. And the whole thing about TA, and particularly co-creative TA, is that it is very optimistic. And still I find it challenging to remember that, to feel that optimism. And I just did rubber band back then. I'm glad you brought it up, because it's very, very real for me, and obviously for other people too. And although I feel shaken by it, it's so good to be able to talk about it, and to know that if I want to make it smaller. I want to account for it, to keep making it gradually a bit smaller, and I will do that. I'm confident that I will do that with help, and I wanted to share that.
Oh, can I chip in there, Jenny? God, thank you for saying what you've just said. And you took me to a place of therapeutically, you know, where you're doing a bit of focusing, and when you make it, when you're visualizing that small problem, whatever it might be, and you're making, I just absolutely love that. That really makes my child feel good. And I also wanted to say, when we're looking at this intrapsychically, I still feel bits of that in my body. Excuse me, I'm a little bit unwell. And I don't feel the urge to shift it really quickly. It's more of a, I'm aware of this, because I had two voices in my head while you know, people were talking. It was, yes, you can get rid of this, it's not a problem, you know, what's the big deal, you know? And then the other voice was, can you get real? You know, things don't just shift like that, you know. They take time, and this, and that voice said, see, this is where you go wrong. You really need to, you know, get into your body and understand yourself, never mind other people. And so, yeah, it seems to be quite a lot going on. But what's helpful is for me to have that awareness, and what people have mentioned about reframing it, because I feel I'm on a constant journey of reparenting. If we want to call that being co-creative, that's, you know, okay. But I know I have to make some shifts in what has gone on in the past for me to move forward. And the way to do that is to do things that make more sense to me now, in the present centeredness of it all. And that gives me a little bit more power as well, not in the, oh, I feel powerful, but in the sense of, no, I've got this. I don't have to live in the past. That was then. My script has changed. I'm changing, developing all the time. So I just wanted to make a note of, it's not always easy, but there's, you know, stepping stones, and yeah, just say again, Jenny, making it smaller, you know, that really, it really warms my heart, that does. It gives me a sense of hope. So and there's no perfection to it.
I think what I want to say is it's a beautiful, I really like that idea of you going slowly, Hearts, and you know, acknowledging that over time it will get smaller and smaller and smaller. And the other thing that I think both Traian and you said that was so resonated with me in this, because I'm working with somebody that's been doubly traumatized in this way, working with a therapist who promised her love and then rejected her for whatever reason. So she's regressed right back to being that baby crying because mummy doesn't want her. And the whole difficulty in that first relationship with a therapist was about power. It was about the therapist believing she could make this difference. She alone could make this difference. If she just loved her client enough, if she held her, if she mothered her, if she let her client feel her heart beat, that would be enough to heal that primal wound. it's an abuse of power then. The power differential has changed because there is not a baby in the room, there's an adult in the room. And you know, perhaps that's the whole tenet, that's a whole thing about where reparenting or where the cathexis school died, I think. We still use the techniques, but that sense of you can take somebody and reconfigure their ego states to such an extent that they can reject that toxic parent. I think that power thing is really important.
I was just going to say, I think it depends very much on the individual, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it's, I think I've had a lot of therapy that has met me very powerfully in enabling me to look back. I'm a fan of redecision and things like that. And, you know, I find attachment and detachment very interesting, of course. But I was going to say as well about the primal wound, you know, I don't know if you've read that book. It's, you know, mostly about obviously adoption, but I think, you know, a lot of us have that primal wound that happened in very early childhood. And for me, I sort of visualize it as a kind of hole that probably won't ever be filled. But if it can just be squidged or a bit smaller with other stuff that I'm, you know, redeciding about myself, trying to change bits that and that's what I do like about the optimism of TA. But yeah, I do think the primal wound or the scar is still there, and it is about acceptance, isn't it, of accepting, you know, I can't change that, we can't go back to the past and change it, but can we accept the past? And I suppose that's why I find it really encouraging this morning, you know, talking about acceptance of each other. And I think that's what we find so difficult out there, don't we? When we want to find something to belong to in here. Can we find it? Don't know.
Yeah, I really like that, Becky, because I was thinking when you're talking about belonging, it's like, if I belong, then everything will be all right. Everything will be solved. And it's like, and that longing to be me, I think fits with that. And I think just what Jenny and Harps was speaking about, to me, just speaks of loss. You know, you spoke about belonging, it's a fear of being rejected, it's a fear of loss. And the protocol, that really early injury, is also a loss that we can't get back. And I know there's a theory about grief where the grief doesn't get any smaller, it's that we grow. And I'm thinking about what you said, Jenny, you know, wanting the injury to go smaller. And I'm thinking, well, maybe it is relative because you're growing and we're all growing with all that we learn. And I like seeing it that way, because we can't, like you say, Becca, we can't change the past. And so it's like grieving its loss.
As I'm listening to these conversations, I've had the integrating adult in my head, from that sense of almost what you were just saying then, Jacqueline, about the dynamism. So making something smaller, but then even when we belong, that is still going to be changing. So it's not as though it's an end in itself. And I wonder whether that's when maybe we get back to, oh, I don't belong again, because it's like, I belong, I feel I belong, I've arrived, as if it's a done deal. But in the co-creative of it, it's still dynamic. There will still be changes within that. And also, as you were all speaking, I was wondering whether, for me, my imaginings of power are what prevent me from belonging. So in the entry into a group, or, you know, what fantasies do I have about where that power is? And again, from my past, and that the word honouring still keeps coming up. So as we are integrating whatever it is that we're Jenny, I can't remember what you said, you're making it smaller as that's being integrated. Yeah, I've lost my train, but I have. I'm just feeling very warm for some reason. Nicely warm.
Can I pick up on that, Amy? Because you talk. Can you hear me? Because I'm.
Yes, we can.
I've just arrived in Glasgow to my grandchildren, and I've literally had to take myself out, and there's quite a lot of noise in the background. Yeah, you talk about making it smaller, and I kind of feel like for me, my experience has been, I don't know whether it's slightly different, but certainly I had an incredibly literal response to the whole concept of needs not being met as a child, and fears around vulnerability and weakness. And I had a really, really vivid dream about this baby that I had found. And this baby was in a really bad state and was really flimsy, weak, floppy, atonic, and my heart just surged towards this baby, and there was this strong sense of I really need to respond to this child, and I really need to make this child strong and to nurture and love it. And obviously it's incredibly literal, and it was obviously it's a dream I've had since. Sometimes the baby's improved and sometimes it hasn't, and sometimes the baby's lost as well. That was a more recent dream where I just had this baby I was desperately trying to nurture in this very apocalyptic kind of scenario that was suddenly, I just couldn't find this baby anywhere. But I feel like that process of it's kind of like, it's almost like belonging to myself. So kind of going into, because I have a very, very deep sense of connection to my inner child, you know, kind of, I've always had this feeling, this fanciful feeling of like this child is somewhere, like a babushka doll is inside me somewhere and I can access it. But for me, it's not really about trying to make that smaller. It's about growing this this child that didn't get some needs met, basically, and didn't get responded to in the way that it needed at the time. And yeah, kind of, it's more that sense, really. I don't know if that adds anything.
It adds. I mean, for me, it does add on to something, Elaine, and it's about understanding and explaining to that child, that past child, that, you know, that response which made sense then can be smaller or can get smaller as a reaction in the present day moment. And it has nothing to do with making that part that had those needs, you know, we could call it a child in TA terms, make it smaller by any means. On the contrary, I would say, what are ways where we can welcome that part of us and make it bigger, nicer, shed light, you know, bringing up, you know, for it, him, her, see daylight.
Yes, because actually picking up on Linda said about the cathexis score, which I actually found really, you know, we've covered it obviously this year in some minor detail. I found that really terrifying, actually, the idea that you would take that on, having had 3 kids of my own. But what I was wanting to pick up on, if I can remember my train of thought, was, yeah, part of the dream process for me has been about parenting myself. So being that mother to myself. So allowing kind of like to feel the vulnerability that I had to cover up and had to tough out, and allowing that vulnerability to exist even though, like you said earlier, it's incredibly painful and challenging, and allowing that process to be, not being very articulate, because obviously it's quite emotional. But there is a sense of hopefulness that there is a process, an ongoing process of a befriending of that unmet need. And I'm really glad that you said earlier on that it's a trauma, and yeah, I think, yeah, obviously it's very, very early stages for me, but it is an ongoing process of growing that child and actually meeting that child's needs. I don't know how successful I'm going to be, but yeah.
What I'm thinking, oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Jacqueline.
I was going to say what I'm thinking of, you just mentioned your grandchildren, and I have, I'm making an assumption, but I'm sure, you will be meeting their needs with ease while you're there. And it's like, how can we do that to ourselves? I find it much easier to do it to others than to myself. And it's a real reminder. And actually, just to share something, which might be overshare, but I think I feel okay sharing it. I had a meeting before this, which was going to be a bit difficult, and I found myself getting quite nervous and feeling the child state riding up. And then I just thought, hang on, this child doesn't need to be at that meeting. It can go and play. It doesn't. I'm going to go in as the adult, and rather than going sort of trying to suppress it and push it and be angry with myself or disappointed, I just realised it didn't need to be there, and it went fine, and I felt really different to how I normally do, and that was a compassion and to myself that I wouldn't normally do.
Well done.
Thank you.
Well done.
Yeah. I think one of the things from a co-creative TA perspective is that it's based on constructivism. So we are, as a number of people have said, you can't change what happened. Yeah. And if we begin to acknowledge and account for and recognize that when our needs weren't met when we were small, we had no power. We couldn't do anything about it. We just had to put up with it and find a way to cope with it. If these sorts of things happen now, we're really powerful and really resourceful, and we can cope with it. So I think one of the ways using co-creative TA, constructivism, is to acknowledge that it happened, and maybe to try and retell the story from a current perspective. And one of those is to celebrate how bloody clever you were at the time, yeah, because you found a way to cope with whatever the trauma was. So you can invite yourself to be really celebratory and smug about the fact that you're still here, yeah, and actually, what is there in the recent past that you've not been able to cope with? We've got loads of resources. We spend our life finding ways to regulate our feelings. And what gets in the way are those old traumas that pull us back. And we don't account for all these times where we have been faced with crises and traumas, and actually we've got through them. So we can we can construct a really different story about ourselves. Yeah.
I feel I'm just interested in what I felt in myself. I felt some doubt in that, because I related to what you said earlier about, my barriers are rejection and trust. So on one hand, I'm optimistic about belonging, very optimistic, and I'm a be strong, and yes, I've survived, and I'm, you know, a confident, healthy woman. And on the other hand, I will just get rejected again.
Mm-hmm. And so if you do get rejected again, is it going to be the end of everything, or will you just find a way through it? Because you are powerful, you have got a lot of resource, and you didn't have then. So is it as scary? It certainly isn't as scary as it was.
It's not scary, but is it worth it? I mean, I suppose, you know, my default is I expect the rejection.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mm.
And we know what script is like. If that's what you're expecting unconsciously, you'll make it happen.
Yeah.
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 So because you want the payoff to reinforce that it's true.
When we all checked in, we were talking about how different we all were in our response to being in this group. So for some of us, there was that scare of, will I be rejected? For others of us, there was that fear of, well, I might get too involved. For others, the fear of, so everything that we're saying is a sort of a reinforcement of what we said right at the beginning, that with all of us, there are all these fears that stop us from belonging.
Mm-hmm. And they were named. Many of them were named. And perhaps some talked that don't usually talk. Or shared something that they don't usually share. And that's the alternative that I think, Paul, you were talking about, which is retelling the story, not from a theoretical perspective, but from an ongoing choosing differently and choosing different type of experiences. And I wanted to call out something that was named quite a few times, which is power. From my perspective, power plays a huge role in co-creativity, in the sense of it doesn't really belong in this type of frames of reference when we work co-creatively or where we strive to be co-creatively. It's not our power, but it's the more negative power, which has to do with pride, that pulls us back into the past. And many times the challenge to be present-centered and be mutually positively regarding others and self is, what's my relationship with power when it comes to others and self? How does that come across in one-on-one relationships, in small groups, in larger groups, and so on? And that's for me where the help of others, of peers, and other members of the groups that I belong to are really useful, because they can, nudge me through the process and ask myself, what am I using power as a currency? What am I doing here? And that shared responsibility and not equal one is the way I put it in practice. In any role that I have, no matter if I'm a facilitator, a manager, or leader, or just, any other member of a group. But that power, I think many times unconsciously is what pulls us back into our past and holds us there into our script, let's say, as we call it in TA. And being honest and being mirrored by others
challenge our approach to power, I find it really, really important. And I find co-creativity being a nice means towards that challenge, positive challenge.
Traian, can you be more explicit about what you mean by power in this context?
Yeah, it's ego. Ego, not ego states, ego. That's what I'm referring to. It's what is it underneath the first layer, second layer, third layer, how many layers I put onto me that again were useful in the past because I was getting my needs met, genuine needs back then that I might be holding on now. And those sometimes are protected through these power dynamics. And it touches on the ego side, letting go, being open, being vulnerable, not knowing, being open to not knowing. These are very subtle and I find powerful means to welcoming these co-creative principles. Is ego a better word to pick up on what I'm talking about?
For me, that works better.
Okay.
But I'm thinking of it in not just in a TA context, but in the way that Eckhart Tolle talks about ego.
Also, yeah. And Eckhart Tolle talks also from a spiritual level perspective, which is the idea of oneness. Even that, and even nudging it down a bit at a psychological level, not having an ego, because he talks about that, but having an ego that it's permeable to what comes and willing to offer, receive and offer. So I'm not discounting the idea of ego. I'm just challenging our relationship to it and how we use power through it, through this process. And it's a subtle and good exercise of self-honesty, I would say.
I just wanted to, oh, sorry.
It's okay. Go on, Jackie.
No, I was just going to say that going on from what you were saying, Traian, is, that makes me think about the kind of the difference between the activity and the passivity, and actually being, keeping the sort of active process within ourselves and also with our clients. And, I'm always, obviously, the contracting that comes in is my way with others of addressing that power or ego. But furthermore, this idea of being active and actively engaging in what am I going to do to, further address my ego, to understand it, to listen to it, to hear it, to
reflect on it.
But something that takes work and takes activity.
Yes. And Paul, I am aware of the need for the break that was called upon. So how about we take a 10 minutes break for a tea, sandwich, or whatever is needed at this time. So see you back in 10.
Okay.
Great reminder to push the button. What we were just talking about, Paul and I, was to describe a bit some of the levels of belonging that we creatively thought of. And then we're curious to see how that resonates with you, and encourage you in some breakout rooms to have a discussion about those. Paul, do you wanna?
Does that sound okay, guys? as a sort of an exercise and an ability for you to explore something reasonably concrete, yeah, and get something from it. So when Traian and myself were talking about and belonging and exploring it over quite a period of time, we had this sort of image model idea that how could you gauge where you were on this belonging scale? Yeah. So there must be a continuum from we could belong to everybody and anybody to we can't belong to anybody or anything. Yeah. So there must be a sort of a scale somewhere, and we must be on it somewhere. So what we explored was maybe, and this is our sort of a theory, maybe that the level at which we find we can belong is where we are on that scale. So at one extreme, can we really belong to a person? Yeah. And at the other end of the continuum is we can only belong to a huge group of people. Yeah. So you could call it a profession, or an international organization, or a country. Yeah. And in between, maybe we're comfortable in belonging to a tennis club, or a small group of close friends, or we can belong to a middle-sized organization. Maybe we're okay belonging to a team in an organization. So we just got this wondering, this sense of, can we get some idea of the level of belonging that we're comfortable with in terms of our experience of the size of group that we have, or the intimacy of the group that we've been comfortable to be able to belong to in the past or currently.
I'm a little confused.
Yeah, I'm not surprised, Jen.
About whether this is a scale of, whether the scale from 0 to loads is about feelings or about the size of the group.
We don't. I don't think we know. It's just a postulate. We got an idea that I suppose we were in doing this. We were thinking about what sort of belonging are we able to, what have we been able to do in the past? Yeah. So and what level of belonging or intimacy of belonging are we able to do currently?
Okay.
There's something interesting in what you just said, Paul, because size or intimacy or because it could be a tennis club that's very intimate relations or not. So how many continui are there that we're considering?
Yeah, as I say, theory is not the right word, a postulate that we're wondering if there's some clues that we can get from what organizations or groups or people have we been able to belong to, and what was that about, and is there some relation to intimacy and size?
Also, there's something there about belong to, belong with, belong in. There's a big difference, you know, which choice of word there is there.
Well, you know, Paul, that's how we were looking at it, because I think we started from the idea, from the realization that we might belong in large groups or organizations, but we don't feel like we belong to or in that organization. So the level of intimacy was quite superficial, although we were very much belonging in those large groups as an ongoing basis in our life. So I think we're just offering some criteria to look at this idea of belonging, which could be size of the group, size of the community, level of intimacy that you are feeling. And if you play a bit with this remembering, or even present day examples, where do you feel more comfortable in? And does comfort have to do with the level of intimacy that you're feeling, or is it actually the opposite? Food for thought. So Jenny, that's why it's confusing, because we don't know it either. There were just, you know, ideas we were trying to navigate around.
Okay.
But we do trust that reflecting from this lens can bring some increased awareness.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Certainly when we were reflecting on it and, you know, developing it and moving it along, we had the sorts of discussions that we hope you might have in a few minutes about, oh, well, that was a big group and I could belong to it, but not in it. Yeah. And so I think you're right, what you're picking up about to and with and in, it varies depending on the level of intimacy and the size of the group. And so where are we in terms of what we're comfortable with or not?
Yeah.
So are you up for just having an explore in little groups and see what you come up with? And yeah, it'd be really interesting to get information from you, because we've not tried it out with anybody yet. So yeah.
Definitely. And I'm wondering where the CCTA lens is with this, because we're looking belonging.
Okay, so I think the CCTA bit is about how, in terms of present-centeredness and we-ness, yeah, where are we in terms of belonging? What is getting in our way of being able to belong more? What is it? Where are we at in terms of what can we work on next, if that makes sense?
Yeah, thanks, Paul.
Yeah.
And even what's the level? It sounds a bit mathematical. It shouldn't be. What's the level of present-centeredness that we might experience in different environments? So it's an invitation for reflection. And, you know, what are those environments where actually we are far less co-creative than, you know, far less than others? Why, how, what do we do? What can we do differently, and all the rest?
And therefore, what gets us, what is it that gets in our way of being co-creative?
So,
Traian, I
yes.
didn't quite catch what you're saying about what is the level of present-centeredness. I didn't catch the end of that sentence.
Yeah, so, you know, in different environments, different contexts where we're part of.
Okay.
Yeah. Is this clear enough? And I'm emphasizing enough lightly, because it shouldn't be too clear. That's the whole point of it.
I think there's plenty to be going
Okay.
on.
Good. So, Paul, I think you're the host. Can you do a bit of a DJing with the breakout rooms?
Yeah. So you'll be in groups of 3 or 4, because if the other ones, I don't want you to get into 2s. I think 2 would be a bit stinted, I think. So we'll put you into groups of 3 or 4, depending on how it works out. Is that okay?
Okay.
And I'll spend 15 minutes and see where you get to. Yeah. And it'd be really interesting to know what you come up with. Okay, here you go, guys. We're really curious about where you've got to. You don't have to fight to go first.
One question that came up for us was, do we equate intimacy and belonging when we were talking about belonging in a small group or a big group and how we felt, or country, and did intimacy, the level of intimacy, equate with the level of belonging?
Mm-hmm.
We don't have an answer.
No, it's one of our wonderings as well. Yeah.
And what I wondered about, particularly with groups or organisations, is, if you like, the culture and how that plays or doesn't for us. because that's simplistically put, kind of driven by the leaders. So as they change, the culture may change slightly. Yeah.
And if I would put a co-creative lens on it, I think it's driven by the leaders to a degree, because there's that level of not equal, but shared responsibility. And that's challenging to some organizations and to some members of the organizations, because it's a direct invitation to chip in and be part of creating that culture of belonging. So I think leaders do have a key role in it to facilitate a healthy environment, and they are part of the bigger picture.
For some leaders, and this is all playing out in the press at the minute, isn't it? They struggle to do anything other than what they want. And so there is something really significant about some people in a leadership role. Clearly, if they have a personality disorder, potentially.
And it's a choice to work co-creatively, to foster co-creativity is a choice. Even that is hard to accept at times, but it's the reality of things.
One of the things that strikes me is whether learning about me and the being me needs to come before, perhaps, or is it part of? Perhaps it's before. I don't know. The belonging. You know, it's being each one of us before we can do the belonging bit. Don't know.
And maybe sometimes we can belong. We can learn to belong if certain conditions are in place.
Yeah, that was something that really went on for me. Something about knowing how to belong. You know, do we know how to belong to that particular environment we're wanting to belong to? So again, I was thinking about, you know, group work, and actually, what are we communicating and providing a sort of baseline knowledge of what's going on here and how we are able to belong, and we're wanted. We are inviting others to belong. Because sometimes it's hard to know how to, especially if we haven't had enough good enough experience of belonging in the past.
I was going to say, it depends what belonging actually means, because you can be part of something and belong to it nominally, which has nothing to do with what we're really talking about here, which is what's going on intrapsychically. So it's, you know, I can be part of, you know, the choir, and it's good fun, and it's, but this, I'm not when we're exploring this, I'm not thinking about my belonging in that respect. I'm thinking of the intrapsychic stuff and the interpersonal stuff that goes on. So I'm just musing about, I am musing about the meaning of belonging.
But also what we touched on was context, wasn't it? So, and I think it's being touched on here, is that if the context is not right,
yeah.
So if there is not, if whoever is running that group or facilitating it is not encouraging trust or openness to people's skills or power sharing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just thinking that makes belonging quite difficult.
Elaine, I just wanted to touch on, sorry, Paul, I really like what you just said there, because that has already given me a bit of an answer, because I talked to my group about trying to make a decision as to which organisation I go with to help me to, but I've got to belong there first, you know, ethically, values, blah, blah, blah. And I know Traian mentioned about, you know, organisation, and I feel educationally, I'm already leading in a progressive way. So that's making me belong in a transformative way, so that, hey, I'm going to set the way that we work here, because I don't actually like the way that things are being run. So, you know, if I don't agree, then I'm not going to do it. So that gives me a sense of my own purpose and belonging. And I'm not going to discount that, because I'm dead good at discounting, and I'm thinking, oh no, I don't do this and I don't do that. So in many ways, I feel like I do belong. But when you've mentioned, Elaine, about openness to skills and encouraging people, etc., that is so important to me as a human being, as a sense of belonging for myself. So either I take that on and work with it intrapsychically and say, hey, but I know where I'm at, I know who I am, blah, blah, blah. And I might not belong in the long-term sense in an organization. Does this make sense? But I've got to be part of me. And to be part of me, I've got to know my own values and how I work, which is more progressively, co-creatively. For now, in this present-centeredness.
So it's coming back to, are the conditions required for us to really feel?
I love that, Paul. Yes, yes, there are definitely conditions, especially, as you know, Paul, in education. It's education. You think, hey, it's education. You know, we're so forthcoming. You know, we change and blah. But they are the ones that are so, you know, stuck in their ways. This is how we do things, and they don't even say it. It's just done. It's the parental structure is disgrace half the time.
Yeah.
So as I do personally in my life, reparent myself, well, I'm going to have to reparent my team, you know, repair it, because it's not the way I like to work. And I just feel that there is so much more you can get out of the children if you're working together co-creatively, like the way I'm proposing, which I'm just doing anyway. Which I'm just doing.
Paul, as you speak of conditions, I've got two senses of conditions. So one is sense of my personal boundaries, maybe. And the other side of that is an awareness of whether those conditions that I'm looking for, in fact, my defenses of which groups I would join. So actually, I think one of the questions that you asked when we went in was, what stops us? And my very straight answer to that is my fear of my vulnerability. Absolutely, that then impacts my spontaneity, so then I'll quiet or retreat. So absolute, and that fear of vulnerability is really closely associated with intimacy.
Yeah, nice one.
But I think actually what's really interesting what you just said, Amy, is like sometimes we put it on ourselves, that the problem with us, that we don't belong, we don't have a sense of belonging to that group, and we take that on ourselves as that's our problem and our issue. But it may actually well be the organization, that the organization is not inclusive or supportive, or I think Traian or whoever said, use the word parental. I think there's a huge amount of organizations out there that are extremely top-down parental.
They work with their own script, don't they? You know, that's and that's what I often fight with, in my head, of course, not outward. And it totally disagrees with how I am, and that's why I feel I've suffered this sense of not belonging, because I don't agree with the organization and how they run things.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And we don't have to belong to everything.
Thank you. Oh, that's nice too. Permission, yay.
We can choose where we want to belong.
Yeah.
That's really interesting after, the pandemic that we've just been through. And looking, if I look at my personal relational patterns since and what I might now choose to be part of or belong is very different to what it was 2 years ago. It's almost a bit like pruning my synapses to a certain extent. It's given a freedom of maybe choice of having done things in the past, because that is what you do, to a pause and a this is what I want to do and what I want to be part of.
And part of when we were doing the exercise, or were we inviting you to do the exercise, I think we were looking to have this type of answers, let's say, which is, what an environment that I feel like I want to belong. Not that much what an environment that I can get better at belonging into, a current environment, because that's questionable to a degree. I wanted to pick up on something that was mentioned, which is skill. And I do believe that there's a skill or a learning that takes place in learning to belong, or belong in a different way, I would say. And you remember the Pam Levin cycles of development, which is a famous TA concept. And the first one is being, and then it's doing. Whenever we want to learn something, we need to go back into the being stage. So what are the conditions that we want to have around us, or that we want to facilitate, where a different being needs to take place before we move into the doing? So in other words, in whatever roles that we have, members, facilitators, educators, managers, therapists, what is it that we're wanting to facilitate? What conditions that would foster first a different manner of being, and then the doing piece can take place for whoever we have in front of us?
I'm hearing some feedback on somebody. Elaine, could you turn your mic off just to see if we can get rid of the feedback? Yeah, it seems hopefully it's better. Yeah.
So,
can I just go back to something that Jenny said earlier, which was about the intrapsychic belonging? Because that sparked for me, Jenny, some thinking along the lines of, well, perhaps it's going to be difficult for us to belong if we don't feel like we belong to ourselves. It's like, we talk about self-love, but actually it's about self-acceptance. It is, I am this person. I am with all of the whatever it is I've got. I've got to be acceptable to myself in order to be acceptable to others. So actually, we can put it all out there, but actually it comes back to us.
Good point. Yeah.
And I think that's what Sandra was saying as well. Yeah. And I think there are exceptions to that, which is when we meet somebody that accepts us for who we are.
In other words, Paul, go ahead.
And that can challenge us. Yeah. So suddenly somebody's accepting us as we are, not as we've learned to be. And that can be a real shock to our system.
That's really pinged me to relational needs and around self-definition.
So it's not an and or. We can learn to accept ourselves through a different experience of belonging. Paul, I'm aware of time.
Yeah. I think we said we would try and finish or bring it to a close and give ourselves time to just check out and see what you're taking away. Just to, yeah. So, where are you? I've enjoyed the exploration and talking with you about what we've been talking about over the last year and a half. So, what have you got to?
Really worthwhile few hours, and so much detail in my notes. And you've encouraged me to revisit the co-creative again. I think I got quite disconnected on the one session I went on because there was a lot of chaos, and I'm not particularly good with chaos. Yes, and clients have come into my head, my own journeys come into my head about everything we've talked about. So informative. Thank you.
Mm.
Yeah, it's been really helpful, really interesting, and I just need to, go and lie down and try and process things. And yeah, just really interesting. I mean, I think the big answer for me maybe is, it's about my self-acceptance. And when you said, belonging, longing to be me or something down, but yeah, which I know, and yeah, more work to be done. Thank you.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed being with you all and having the space to just talk and explore and chew the cud. Thank you very much. It's been great. As you said, who was it who said, was it you, Anne? A very worthwhile 2.5 hours. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I'd like to say, I will say, I mean, the time's just gone so quickly, which shows that I'm obviously totally engaged with it. And I'd like to echo what Becky said about the self-acceptance and the longing to be me. I mean, that really struck a chord. I'm going to work on that longing to be me. There've been a lot of triggers and it's all been really, really great. I've really enjoyed it and I've enjoyed meeting everyone and I felt safe in this group. So I do feel that I belonged to this group, with this group this morning. Mm.
Wow, Jenny.
Well, I've just made a quick summary. I wrote, so belonging is, how is it for me? Start with me, do things my way. I don't have to belong to everything, and start to learn in the being. And there's a choice to foster it co-creatively. So, it's nice when you can go away and you can actually surmise what you've learned. And it's okay to be me. So, yeah, I'm okay. Thank you. And it's been an absolute pleasure to be with you all. And time has just gone like that, which always shows what a great workshop it is once again. Thank you.
I just want to say, sorry, I was interrupting somebody. Harps, that sounded like a piece of poetry then. It was jigging along like a piece of poetry.
Oh, thank you. Yay.
Yeah. Also, I just want to also add on to what Jenny said, that thank you, because I really had a feeling of belonging today, as I have with listening to many of these workshops, and it's a lovely experience. And yeah, my head is absolutely full. I feel like I tell you what, I feel like those balls of string with lots of different ends to them, and I just kind of want to pick each of them through, and yeah, so it's been great.
It's called deconfusion, Jackie.
Maybe
it's called the
maybe.
start of deconfusion.
maybe. But thank you.
Yeah, thank you too, and thank you for becoming part of this group today. I feel like there is a group within there, and then others have come in, and it's felt very welcoming. And yeah, I think my head's a bit like that too. I thought, oh yeah, belonging, that'll be interesting. There's lots of stuff going on, so I'm not going to think it. I'm just going to let it bubble away. So thank you very much.
Yeah, I think it feels like this is a huge philosophical discussion. It could go on for weeks and months and probably years. I like that description that Jacqueline said about, you know, letting it bubble, and it feels like perhaps it's a case of just being with this whole idea and seeing what happens. And the time's flown by, and certainly when I remember looking at the clock and seeing we had 25 minutes in our individual group, it gone in a moment. So thank you again for another really good workshop. I really appreciate running these. Thank you very much.
I just want to say thank you very much as well. I mean, I wasn't expecting to get in on this group because I tried to get in on the last one, and then when I found out that you've rescheduled it, literally I got off the plane at 10:30 and I walked in, said hello to my granddaughter and dived straight in, which I felt a little bit bad about, but actually they're out of the park and I'm going to go and join them in a minute. I think for me, I think the fact that there are so many of us that are wrestling with this issue has felt very, it's created a great sense of belonging, actually. And it's like, yeah, I just really appreciate all what everybody has shared. And I do feel like it's not my problem, just my problem. And yeah, I think I've taken notes. I'm going to go away, think about it and take it forward. But I think a lot of what I have heard today has it's felt like some of the burden has come off of me, that it's not just my problem. It's not just about, doesn't just start with me. But it can start, you know, the work starts with me, but it's not just because of my own failings. So yeah, thank you everybody.
Yeah, guys, thanks for the really reflective space today, and the lens of looking at belonging, which, as you said at the beginning, Traian, you know, where does it sit? Where is it accounted for? And as we've all been checking out and noticed that the time has flown by, I did wonder, is that because we have all been in here doing it together? You know, not that sense of we're being taught and told and time limits. And so I'm just curious about that time flying. So thanks, guys.
We do try to walk the talk.
And that's the great learning of the sessions, I think. Me.
Right. So is everybody done? Who wants to? Yeah.
Who wants to? Yeah. And Paul, we do this for quite some time. I do want to call out and be so appreciative of the co-creativity that took place in this virtual room, because we, a big we, capital letters, we all contributed. So we can only hope to foster some of those conditions through the principles, through what we bring. So thank you. I'm really, yeah, hopeful and happy.
So I think we're also at a point where we can share some of our excitement about what's going to happen in October.
Go ahead, Paul.
Because we've been working. We were going to do a summer school 2 years ago, just before the pandemic started, and we've had to put it off a year, and we put it off another year. So the long weekend of the 21st, 22nd, and 23rd of October, there is a co-creative TA conference going to be held in Gothenburg. And we're just getting the website and the program all sorted out. So this is the first time we've mentioned it at these sessions. So be on the lookout. If we will be letting people know about it, but it is going to be that weekend. And all of the team is going to be there, except Keith, who we're hoping will actually join us on either join us on Zoom at some point or record a video to be there. But the whole of the team is going to be there.
So Paul, when you mean the team, is the team of people who are facilitating this workshop? So
yeah,
it's you, me, Nicole, Bev, James, and Berit, and of course you have more info on the website, and also Graham.
And Graham's coming, yeah.
And not Keith, as you said. We will follow up with more details, but we wanted to share this with you because it is the first time we're letting it out there formally.
So I'll reiterate what Traian said, which we always say at the end of all these, that this only happens because you contribute, and you really joined in at the beginning by being vulnerable and sharing parts of your stories, and I think that's one of the conditions of inviting people into co-creativity. That enabling yourself to put your vulnerability into the room. So thank you, all of you, for joining in and filling the space, joining the space with us. And hope your heads don't explode. and talk to somebody about it, then they don't. and hopefully we'll see you at another one soon. And I think after June, I think there's going to be quite a break, isn't there? July and August.
Yeah, until September.
Yeah, until September.
We're resuming September.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for facilitating this. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
You're very welcome.
I was